Um, so thanks everyone for joining today for our session, Growing a Sustainable School Meal Program. Our speaker today will be Fatima Da Silva, the Executive Director for Nourish Cowichan. And our session will go from now until approximately 4:30, and it really depends on the number of questions, but we'll have a question and answer period at the end. So as I mentioned, we are recording and storing these presentations up on the Farm to School BC YouTube page. So I'll give a more formal presentation when we begin, but Fatima will be the focus of today's session. Myself, I've been with Farm to School BC about 7 years right now, provincial manager. And before that, did school garden kind of development and things along those lines. But I'm just the host to just kind of make it all roll by. You won't be hearing too much of my experience. So a little territorial acknowledgement. Today, myself, I am acknowledging that I'm presenting from the Howsett Nation in the village of Moctezes, and I just pulled up a little picture of my son on his first day of school this past year in front of the school gymnasium, which is a real a place of gathering here in the community. The Howsett name, the name Howsett, means facing opposite from the ocean, or people living with their backs to the land and mountains. And from my view here, when I look out, there's these two really beautiful mountains that are just across the water there. So it's really speaks to the kind of the actual geographical location. Howsett is a member of the Nutritious Nation. It's actually the largest of the Nutritious Nations, with a population of over 2,000 people. So just a few slides about Farm to School BC. We're a provincial food education program, food literacy program administered by the Public Health Association of BC. We bring healthy, local, and sustainable food into classrooms, into professional development through teachers, and we've been around since 2007. We embrace, celebrate, and support a diversity of food education projects and encourage schools to pursue initiatives that best serve the unique needs of their students and communities while adhering to our core pillars. A little bit about Farm to School BC, been around for 18 years. Our annual granting process has funded nearly 400 schools now, with over 50,000 students engaged in our projects. Just a slide on some of the different types of projects. Really, the projects that we support come from the interests within schools and communities, and we just sort of follow that and develop a lot of our resources and support pieces around what we see of interest. And that's the way that we've always responded over the years. Is there'll be an interest in indoor growing, so we will look to develop those resources. We will put on webinars such as this that speak to that and bring together people with like-minded interests. Hence why we have Fatima here today with Feeding Futures and the Rise of School Meal Programs. It's the right time to be bringing people together. So for those of you who live within what was once known our hub regions, it's still relatively the same, but we've now looked to expand and do our best to support in a regional sense. So it's really a provincial sense, and we've modeled those regions off of the health authorities. And so depending on which region you are in here, you will have a regional coordinator that lives within that geographic region to offer support. So probably best known for our annual grants. That cycle opens up every year in October. So we just gave out our grants recently. Over 40 grants were given out to schools from all across the province, and just some statistics and information here. So stay tuned for this coming fall for when that cycle opens up again. On our website, we have lots of different resources, toolkits, things we've developed. Probably the one that might be relevant here is a guide to growing a school farm, or a hands-on food even. So these are just different resources that tell stories, offer lesson plans, links to resources, budgets, and different things along those lines. They can all be found on our website under teacher resources, but often right on the main page there. Just wanted to note, if you're not already signed up or engaged in our social media or our newsletters. It's a really great opportunity to keep up to date. We through those platforms, we also let people know in advance of our grants being launched. That's an opportunity for us to share out stories that of the funded schools and et cetera. So we now actually have regional newsletters. So what's unique about this is these they're designed to really speak to the geographic. They're tailored for your health region that you live in, and so they bring both provincial news and bigger news, but also smaller localized events, funding opportunities, making connections and telling stories about school community activities. So if you're not signed up for a regional newsletter, I highly recommend that you do. You can find that on our website and sign up there. A couple projects that we are supporting and working on right now that you probably have heard of. One being the Great BC School Food Cook-Off. So this is a cooking competition with awards going out to schools. But one of the really exciting things is the recipes will all be then brought together into a recipe cookbook that's for school meal program coordinators, cooking educators, et cetera. And they're all designed by schools. And so if you're not, please do register. It's still open for a little bit more time to submit a recipe to be entered into a competition and then to have it profiled in a recipe book that will be launched within the coming months. We just launched this as well. We've been doing pollinator awards for a number of years, but we've changed it a little bit this year where you can nominate a school or school food champion to be a pollinator and win a $1,300 prize to host either a school field trip or an in-school food feast, essentially an event that celebrates the connection to local food. And so this is open right now, and we're actively requesting nominations to come in. We will be randomly picking them, one for each health authority across the province. And along with this, we're developing a resource for hosting school field trips that we'll be giving out to those participating, and then will be on our website once it's published. So it's kind of a little two-part piece that we're working on right now. Okay, that's it for me right now. So I'll give an introduction, and then Fatima, I'll pull down this slide and I'll pull up yours, and then we can begin. So really, really excited to have Fatima joining us today. We've heard a lot about really the great work that's been happening there. Nourish Cowichan began providing meals in schools in 2016. Now they provide hundreds of nutritious, delicious meals to 33 schools. And we're excited to have Fatima join us so we can learn firsthand about how Nourish Cowichan develops school meal programs, works closely with schools and school districts, and how they started. And if you want to start a school meal program in your district, this webinar will both inspire and outline some of the tangible steps. So as I mentioned, Fatima will give the presentation, which is around 20-ish or so minutes, and then after I'll help conduct a question and answer period. So I'm going to stop sharing and pull up Fatima's presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for having me over. This is really special for me to be able to share in this platform. My voice may be a little bit weird. I had laryngitis, so if this, it might disappear at some point, or I'll pretend it disappears. Thank you so much. I am joining you today from the Cowichan Valley, which is a traditional unceded lands of the Coast Salish. I am so grateful to live in the Cowichan Valley. This is what I live, work, learn, and play. I'm usually very informal when I am talking to a group of people. I don't like getting too formal about it. So today I just want to share a little bit of our story and how Nourish came to be. Before I start that, if we can go to actually probably the slide number 2, the following one. Yeah, I want to talk what is the structure of Nourish, what is the heart of Nourish, and how this is so important to us. And then I'll go over our guideline we got started. But I think this part is so important because this is the build foundation for our organization. The most important of all is equity for all our students in our school district. It is important to us to talk about equity for every student because there's been so many misunderstandings at times, and we're still going through all of this because it is a learning process for us as well. But we talk a lot about equity, removing barriers in our school food programs across the district. And the most important part of it, that it is what built Nourish, is community engagement. And you're going to hear me talk about community engagement throughout the entire presentation. It is very important to me because it is the root and the core of who I am. I grew up in Africa and in a war zone. And the reason that I have survived and became a very strong person is because I was surrounded by community. My upbringing was a responsibility of the entire community. At one point as an adult, actually, I realized that the last time that I lived with my mother, I was probably 11 years old, but I never felt like that my mother wasn't there or that I didn't have family. My mother had cancer when I was very young, and back then there was no treatment in Mozambique. I have to move to Europe. So I never really felt abandoned because there was a community taking care of me, my siblings. So I always felt the strong attachment of building community everywhere I went. So when we start putting Nourish together, the backbone of it always been the community engagement. So those values are so important for us, and we're still working on it. We're still building that community. Although we live in a very small town, we still encounter people that don't know what Nourish is. So it's a growing organization. I don't think we'll ever be a point where we think that we made it, because there's always something new to learn for us. So with that community comes a very strong guidelines to, we always listen to the community before we make any decisions. And that community could be sometimes just students or teachers, but that conversation is ongoing. So we never really stop listening, and that's how our growth has been progressing. And for instance, for the first time this year, we have a student advisory committee, because we also felt like we needed to hear directly from the students, not just the adults that run the program. So that's where we are when it comes to the principles and guidelines for our organization. If you don't mind now putting the next slide, and we'll talk about how Nourish started. Nourish started actually, it was a customer of our restaurant that kept bringing up the issue of a specific school that she knew that a lot of the kids came to school without a meal. I don't know what was her connection to that school. I think she was a nurse, a community nurse at that school. And she kept bringing up that issue for years to me. And it wasn't until I sold that particular restaurant, and I found myself one day driving to my second location and realizing that I was going to be extremely bored after Thanksgiving. And I had the sense of urgency of pulling over and calling her to find out what they were doing about that specific school and program. And within 2 hours, this was October, I think October 11. I remember it was right after Thanksgiving. Within 2 hours, we're meeting and talking about that specific school. What we found out, there was about 80 to 90 students that they knew of that were coming to school without a breakfast. Before our conversation ended, we had called the principal of that school, requested a meeting, and the PAC got involved, and within a week we're having a meeting at the school and talking about how we could support that program. So by November 2016, we start running the trials. And we figure out that at the time that we're going probably to need a little bit more help in trying to understand how schools worked in the Valley, if that was a problem that existed just in one school or most of the schools in the Valley. So we started trials during November. By January, we had a full breakfast program for that particular school, and we're doing our research. Through that process, between that time, we realized that talking to the community, because our conversation community started right away, because we needed the money to actually fund that breakfast program, was that we needed to either figure a way to become a society, incorporate, but we didn't want to take money from people without accountability. So between that conversation in October and start the trials, by March of 2017, we had become a society and a charity organization. We just didn't stop at one thing. We just kept going. And so as soon as we had all that paperwork in our hands, we called the school district and requested a meeting with the superintendent and the trustees to introduce ourselves. And that we are the very receptive superintendent at the time, that the moment he heard school food program, he was so invested in making sure that whatever we could offer will be available to most of the students. And that was really important for us during that process, because as soon as we started talking to principals, we found out the problem was bigger than we thought. So this conversation kept going. More schools started wanting to get involved in the program. So we were running out of space where we could do this program, because our kitchen at the restaurant was only closed 2 days a week. So there was only 2 days that we could make everything we needed to supply the school. So that wasn't very sustainable. So we started emailing the school district. The more students we had registering, we kept emailing them. And by June 2017, a partnership with the school district was created. If we go to slide 4, and the school district found a space that been abandoned for probably 7 years. It was an old metal workshop that nobody was using, one of the schools. And it was at the last day of school, the trustees called an emergency meeting. And I think what I heard from the teachers and the people that were at that meeting, which I did know that the meeting was happening, it lasted 3.5 minutes, unanimous vote from the entire body of trustees to give that space to Nourish to build that kitchen. that was probably one of the most amazing days for us. I only found out actually around 10 or 11 o'clock at night because I had turned off my phone while I was at work. It wasn't until I got home that I found all these messages of congratulations, and there were social media posts about what had just happened. And I had no idea what people were talking about until I went to the school district link and saw the press release for that space for us. And we went to work right away. But this is when we talk about community, when we talk about people becoming part of a dream, becoming part of a movement, because I always thought Nourish as a grassroots movement. Is from very beginning, even with the school district, I made it very clear with them that this should not be a responsibility of one or two individuals, that every single child should be everybody's responsibility. The school districts have a responsibility towards them, the community had a responsibility towards them. And we had a superintendent that was so engaged and so focused, and they trusted our vision to do this, because without it, it wouldn't have happened. That was a game changer for us to have somebody that was so willing to take the risk on us and be able to open the doors for us to do it. So that partnership allow us to build the commercial kitchen. Was still operating in right now, and I don't know if any of you were ever on the island. Please come and visit, because we are proud of this space. Not for just the size of it, but the spirit of community in every single corner. In the space, everywhere you turn, there's something donated by the community. We did not have the money to build a commercial kitchen. So what we did, the space that had been abandoned for the longest time, we pretty much, after it got cleaned up, it took forever for them to get the equipment out of here, because there wasn't even a door to take the equipment out. They had to build a new door. The equipment was so big, because I think after they had put all the equipment, they had closed the door that they originally had, so they couldn't take the equipment out. And it took probably 6 months for them to do it. From the beginning to the end of us taking the space, it took about 8 months for us to have the space, which was fine, because we didn't have the money to build. But what we did was talk to different contractors, people that will be willing to take a chance on us and allow us to pay slowly. And what we did, we put an invitation, an open door to the entire community for breaking the ground of the space. And everywhere around this empty space that we had a tea party for the community, there were tags, keys with tags with all the equipment we needed, from a simple paring knife, cooking pots, dishwasher, every single thing that we have in this kitchen that we originally had. We've only been buying equipment lately. Everything was donated by the community. There were people that knew they couldn't afford to buy as a freezer, so they ran into friends. I think about 150 people showed up, and they were pairing with each other to buy us that equipment. So all the keys were taken. We had items anywhere from $2 all the way up to $25,000, and everything was taken. As we built this kitchen, people in the community found out we had to negotiate with our contractor as people came forward to offer their services, from floors, paint, countertops, that he will allow people to donate those items, even though it was on the contract that he was going to supply those. And he was game on it and allow us to built this kitchen with the support of community. We came actually under budget by $40,000. In spite of everything, how big the work was. It was a contaminated space, had lead and asbestos. In spite of all that, we came under budget because of all of those donations. And that was established right from the beginning. We understood that in order for us to do that work, we needed to call on the community. We needed to have those conversations. And so we built this kitchen. We took possession of it in March 2019. And at that point, so many schools have signed up that the board decided that I probably will be more useful if I left the board and became the executive director. So we separated governance from operation at that point. So as I was leaving, the superintendent that helped us grow and find the space was retiring as well from the school district. So for 2 months, I called, I emailed, I left, I texted, begged for him to join Nourish in any capacity he wanted, because I knew he had the know-how and the insight that would require to keep growing. He knew how the school districts work. He knew how the ministry worked. So we needed an ally, somebody that knew better than us, and how to navigate that properly. And it took a few months, but eventually he called and asked me to stop harassing him, and he will join us on the fight. And we established very soon that I do not give up until it gets done, because it shouldn't be just a few people being responsible for it, that we needed to build this community that had the students' best interest. So he joined us, and I think he joined us in November 2019. I started my job as executive director January 1st, 2019 as well. And here we go. And the next, I think our next slide, let's see, is that the community engagement? Yeah, well, I would like to go back and talk about that community engagement a little bit more, but I would like to go to the next one, number 6, which is pivoting from a pandemic and where we are now. Just to give you an idea of what happened to us during that time. So we moved to the new kitchen, closed the restaurant in November. We're very happy trying to figure out our next steps, which schools we're going to take on. And spring break is coming, is going to give us time pretty much to reset and figure out what we needed to do. And a few days, I think it was 2 or 3 days before the shutdown was announced, we got a message to be on standby, that we probably needed to be ready to change the way we did the program at that point. So we get the news that the schools we weren't coming back from the spring vacation. All the schools were shutting down. So we call an emergency meeting with the entire board, trying to understand what our role would be with all the kids in school that were feeding in school, that will be home, and we didn't know for how long. Nobody knew. So we had to figure a way to change that. We still felt the sense of obligation to keep nourishing those kids. We had made a commitment from the beginning that we were going to do. So within just a week or two, we met with the school district. We figured a way to distribute food to the kids that were most at risk. We got families to sign up, and we started a full AMPA service to all of those families that will sign up and will require. We didn't put a limit to how many families we're going to support, and the school district offer to do the distribution for us. So we went from feeding kids in school to having to run this program now that had to cook for entire families, work with all our suppliers to make sure we had enough supplies to do weekend, not just weekend hamper, but actually full hampers for all the families that required our help. So we went from being right under $200,000 a year, because we were doing just breakfast at the time, to 2020 having to spend over $600,000 in supplies, in food. We opened 4 other kitchens to keep up with the demand we had, and between March and September of that year, 6,255 hampers were made. It was probably the most stressful time, but at the same time, the most rewarding. I had never seen, I lived in Africa and people take care of you all the time, but I saw a community coming together so fast, making sure that we had everything we needed. I came to work one day not knowing even where we're going to get gloves and masks. And that day, somebody showed up at our door, and all they said, "We have a package for you. You didn't get from us. Do not ask us where we got." And in the box was surgical gloves, masks, and there was a couple of buckets on the side full of sanitizer. We were so stunned of all this community. Everybody was coming at the door and donating everything we needed. We wrote the guidelines we needed to function. We sorted out all the volunteers we needed. During the entire time, not once any of our volunteers or the people that work with us from the school district that came to our space to work, not once everybody got sick. We had very strict guidelines and posters everywhere, reminding people that more than 1,000 people were depending on us to do our job properly. And that worked really well for us during that time, and we were able to do our job and deliver everything we had promised those families that we would do. The students were able to get the food that they needed. So as we came back, there was a lot of time for reflection of what direction we would go. And as we're coming back, the schools were opening. That's when the school district came and asked us if we would be willing to take all the food programs in the school. And without even thinking, I said yes, not knowing what I was getting myself into. And I remember when they left, turning to our president and going, "Wait, what did I say yes to?" I had no clue what I had said yes to. And I had a little panic moment, because I realized that meant breakfast, lunch, snacks, and we didn't know if we were going to be doing hampers or weekend program, but meant having to do all of that. And I didn't even know that we had the capacity to do it. Again, we put in the call, and volunteers started signing up. Today, we have between 70 to 80 active volunteers. And we are now in 23 schools in the Cowichan Valley, supporting more than 2,700 students daily, and the families that are most at risk, also the school district direct them to us so they can come and get food for the week. Let me see. Where do we go? What are we talking now? I think we have talked quite a bit of that community. Part of that community engagement when I want to give really a good example, something that we love sharing this story. We have a few garden beds in front of our kitchen. There's 8 garden beds that we put herbs and we put tomatoes. Some of our neighbors were walking by and they came and asked us if we're happy with with what we're growing. We said, well, yes, but they said, well, is it enough? I said, well, obviously it's not. So they asked me to go outside with them. They live on a street just parallel to the school, and it backs into the school ground. And they had this almost a third of an acre of just grass. And they said, well, if you want to kill the grass, we're tired of mowing, you can use the space and grow food for the students. And after a couple of weeks of conversation, made them sign on the dotted line that we could use a list for 10 years. We created a small garden. The school district put a gate that allows us to go from the school into the space. I am not in charge of the garden because the moment I told my family I was going to have a food garden, my sister choked laughing because I am known to kill every single plant. She went traveling once, left me with her cactus. She came back. I had managed to kill her cactus. So I hire people to do the gardening, and we use volunteers to help with that garden. Our very first year, I would like to take credit for this, but I can't. Our gardeners, on top of what we're using in the kitchen, we were able to actually freeze 1,000 pounds of tomatoes that little space. So it gave us a really good idea that probably we needed to talk more to other people that had land and farms, and we have now an offer to expand that space, not that space, but to get another space 2 blocks away from where we are, in the same street where we have that garden. So we're getting this people in our neighborhood that are now offering space in their backyards or their farms for us to do it. And every time this happens, I love to remind people how important it is to engage everyone. It doesn't matter how little, how big they have to offer. Everybody has something that they can offer. And if you allow them to come into your space, your life, and allow them to see the value of sharing whatever knowledge, whatever gift they have to share for the betterment of our school food programs. That's how we grew. And it is a lot of work to manage people. Yes, it is. But there's a beauty of not feeling that we're the only people responsible for those students, that it's an entire community that's working together to make sure that every single student in the school that wants to have a meal, we have the strong open door policy that those students actually can get the best that we can offer. So let me see where how did I lose some of this stuff? I would like to go to another slide here.
Just a note to Fatima, about 4 minutes approximately. Yeah.
I just want to talk about the funding. So is slide number 7. Because we get a lot of this question about funding and sustainability. A lot of our funding came from community. And that's why it's so important for us to have that conversation. Sustainability financial capacity, that came all from community. Before the Feeding Future even existed, we were able to actually do this program. Feeding Future was what allow us to grow even bigger and probably not stress too much. But without that engagement from the community, without all of the fundraiser that goes into our community, we wouldn't be able to function. Just to give you an idea, this coming year, only 1/3 of our budget is coming from Feeding Futures. We're going to be operating this year 1.5 million. That means the other million comes for grants and community. So it's really important to have this relationship with the community. The latest gift we got, it was through a volunteer, was a dinner, listen to a conversation, a bunch of people talking about, having made a little bit too much money and they wanted to donate without him knowing how much that was. He made an impromptu presentation about Nourish. And 2 weeks later, we got this gift of more than $90,000 from a single individual. That will not have happened without those volunteers. A lot of the money that we get comes from that. So it's really important to have this conversation and make sure that we all in this together, that every single child is everybody's responsibility. And that's has been the main focus of our growth and how we have got where we are today. And without that support from the community, from farmers, drivers, every single person that comes our way has something to offer, and we are open to receive. We open to have that conversation and work together with everyone. Even the Grinch that you see in there, that's usually who we send if people don't want to give us money. So we send the Grinch to them. So thank you for listening to me. I'm open to any questions you may have. And thank you so much. But, and this is usually a time for us at this time of the year where we have a lot of reflection going. So ask away if you have any questions.
Thanks so much, Fatima. Super inspiring when you said at the very beginning about community being such an important part of your own childhood, etc. And then you really walked the walk in the way that you talked about it. Like, I'm so curious. I have lots of questions. I want to open up the room to ask questions first, but like just your ability to mobilize community is really phenomenal. That's like a major takeaway from here. So I just, good work on that. Like, it's clear that you were motivated and you knew that it needed to be community involved. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm going to open up the room. I do see Serena's hand up. So you're welcome to ask questions. We've got about 10 minutes of questions. You can either put up your hand, such as Serena has done there, by the raise hand icon at the bottom, or you can go in the chat and I can read out the question there to Fatima. So over to you, Serena.
Hey, Fatima.
Hi, Serena.
Sorry, we've been trying to meet for a while.
Yeah.
I had a question about the school district.
Yeah.
Do you have a service agreement with them?
Yes. And I probably lost that a long time ago, but they think I still have. I threatened them from the beginning, and it was more about shared responsibility. More than anything else, because of liability issues of us bringing to the schools. And this is important for everybody to know. If you're a provider, make sure that you have that shared agreement with the school district with the liability on both sides, because you're not into the school doing the distribution. That's left to teachers, EAs. So make sure there's agreement that every single person in the school district that's going to be in charge of that food as a food safety, and they know what they're doing. So that was very clear on our agreement to them, that we stop at the door. The rest of it, they need to make sure that they do the work properly.
Right. And then they have school meal workers, but you're essentially managing their Feeding Futures money. Is that right?
The portion for the food, yeah, because remember that with the Feeding Futures money, they also allowed to use it for salaries for school food program. So we get a portion of it. We don't get all of it.
Right. And so who do you connect with at the school district? Like, who's your liaison person? Like, is it
my liaison with the school district is the assistant superintendent. We meet at the monthly basis. Either we need or not, but we keep in a monthly basis just to make sure that we have an open conversation all the time. And if any issue arises, we'll go over it. If there's a new project, we go over it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Serena. Meg. Okay, Quentin has a hand up. Yes, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, Fatima. You and I have talked a few times on this. I just, it's every time I talk to you, it's inspiring. And every time I hear you tell this story, it's inspiring. The question I have is, like, that first conversation that you said that you had where you were talking to the school principal, and then when you ended up at the school district, it sounded like that all happened really quickly to get to some sort of an agreement. So I don't know if you want to go back and elaborate on that. And in particular, I'm just curious, like, what were some of the questions that you got asked in those initial meetings, and what were some of the things that you had to address and then go away and find a way to take care of in those really early days?
Absolutely. I think yeah, it was interesting because first we found a principal that was willing to take the chance on us before we went to the school district, and he was desperate having something happening at his school. And I think it might have been easier for me because I had been already in the Valley, having two restaurants for the longest time. So people kind of knew me and trusted that I could do the work. So there's a little bit of that may have played in my advantage. And I was introduced to the school by a community nurse that was operating already in the school. So from there to going to the superintendent, when we had everything in place, so they couldn't say no, I pretty much, I said jokingly, but apparently it took me seriously, that if he did not come on board, I was joking. I wasn't serious about it. I don't really know how much I was joking. That if they didn't do anything about feeding the kids, that would shame them publicly. I will have that conversation in public, and I have no shame in my game, because it was the thing I told them right away. I don't have kids in school, so really do not care. And the fact was that they did not have any money to investing on it. We'll raise all the money, we'll bring to them. It was being done already in a kitchen that was approved by Island Health. So there was no reason for them not to take the chance and let us try. The agreement was signed months later, but I pretty much didn't give them much option not to do it, because I was always ready with the next question, which I sounded like a toddler, was why not? And I kept asking until there was no other way around it. And I already had one school that take a chance on us, and it proved to be successful. So that's how I worked around it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Quentin.
So the lesson is shame people.
Love it. Serena.
Sorry, one more question. Do you
Yeah.
have any financial accountability with, like, because they're giving you, like, let's say $500,000.
Yeah.
You have to show them how that money's being spent?
They know it's being spent all in food, because if this past year, for example, 23-24, because our financial statements are available. Our year end is available to the public because we're a charity organization. So everything has to be accounted for. We have a board. So they have our financial statements. They come to all our AGM. So if the money that we're spending, even this past year, we still, even what we spend on staff is less than, it was less than 26%. So all the money is going into the school. So we provide them with our financial statement. So if the program is costing 1.3 million and they only putting $500,000, it's pretty much we're still financing the program. Yeah. And remember, we were there prior to Feeding Future. We're already putting that much money in it without asking anything in return besides the space, and that they paid the hydro for the space. That was their contribution. Yeah.
Thanks for that question. I have one that I wanted to, that I thought about. I know the Cowichan Valley is very rich in farmers, producers, processors. How have you engaged with growers in this program?
It's really interesting because it becomes a little bit of a joke around us because we're trying to buy from farmers. And we quite often get no from farmers. It's tricky to buy from farmers for us because they all think it's their responsibility to donate the food. Last thing that we bought from a farmer, we actually had to send a friend to buy it. Because the farmer does a lot of squash and we needed more than what he was giving, but every time we asked, he wouldn't give us a bill. So we sent somebody with a pickup truck. He pretended that he was paying for it. Well, he ended up paying because he donated that money for us to pay. But most of the farmers in the Cowichan Valley quite often want to donate because they think this is part of their responsibility as well to support the program. So last year, actually this past summer, we got one of the farmers to agree to sell us half of the corn we needed and the other half he could donate. So we're trying to encourage farmers that we need more than what you donate to us, so please let us buy some of it versus just donating. And we're starting getting to some agreement with that. We had a meeting with the Co-op, which is an organization that has a bunch of farmers, and we asked them for help to contact the rest of the farmers in our behalf to have them selling to us instead of just donating. Never thought I'd have that problem, that people wouldn't want my money, but there goes your community there at work, right?
Great, thank you for that. We have time for maybe one more quick little question. If anyone wants to squeeze one in here, either in the chat or to put the hand up. One more question for Fatima. Quentin.
Yeah, I don't want to dominate it, so if anyone else wants to, they can go ahead. But it should be a quick question. When you are like preparing food for these schools, like do you provide menus in advance, or is it kind of just like they get what they get? You know, like how do you
No, actually we have menus and we have so many items on our menu, and they divided by breakfast items, main items, snacks, and everything in between. So each school have their own order form online, a Google Doc. They get to choose and decide based on their capacity to handle the food. They get to decide what they choose. We don't choose that for them, and we give them enough for them to, for example, if there's students that are gluten-free, vegetarian, the school decides what they want and how much of it they need. So that's how we usually do. The schools decide on that, and we send them what they need.
Could you share a menu with maybe Marcus and I, and we could share it out? I'm curious. I'd like to see what one of them looks like.
Yeah, I'll definitely. Do you want now, or I don't know if I can do it now.
No, I don't need it right now.
Okay,
Just
yeah,
next few
I'll
days.
send you that. Yeah, it's pretty extensive menu, and then we add specials depending what we get. If there's something from a supplier, for instance, this summer, one of our local farmers had so much corn, and one day we decided I'm not doing this again without having a plan to buy 500 corn. Yeah, you need to process 500 corn, right? So we had actually a corn soup, and it's interesting how kids, because we've been doing this for so long, they notice the difference between mass-produced corn or tomatoes. And they know the difference when, because at the end of summer, so many people bring us tomatoes that we process and freeze or make sauces or soups. And definitely they can tell locally grown organic tomatoes from any other one. Yeah, but I will be able to send you that for sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Quentin, for the question. I have just one couple slides about the upcoming webinars that'll show. There is one question down there, Fatima, if you're able to maybe answer it in chat, or if you're able to stay on for a minute or two after. There's a question down there. Firstly, just want to thank you so much for sharing such an inspiring story. Your dedication and drive is really impressive of what you've been able to do. Just super glad to have you join us and share that out. I know there's so much more to your story. This is only a snapshot into it. So
you can all come and stay over, and we can have a big party at the kitchen.
Okay, in closing, just to let everyone know, we do have a very similar themed webinar coming up April 3rd. And it'll be Matthew Kemshaw, the Executive Director of Flourish School Food Society, supporting School District 62. And so he'll be joining us to talk about their program and the resource that they've been creating over there in their program to support school meal program development. So he's going to be coming there as a bit of a launch of this resource toolkit that they've been creating. So please do come to that. Of course, follow us on social medias, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll also put into the chat right now quickly that we will be uploading the webinar here to this link. It's just right on our website. It's along the top banner. That'll be up usually within 24 hours for those who want to return to it or share it out. So yeah, so thanks again, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate bringing this community together. And I know it's really important. We're still in the very early stages of so much of the Feeding Futures in School meal development. And there's going to be so many incredible developments. In 5 years from now, the stories are going to be incredible to hear of the different organizations that have been inspired by you, Fatima, and others, and have taken it in their own directions and served the kids in the school. So, yep, thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.